Welcome to the episode of The Trout Show, Vinyl to Viral. Rediscovering music's forgotten legends. With your host, The Trout, and today, he's spotlighting a forgotten legend, Shuggie Otis. In the 70s, Frank Zappa and Quincy Jones called this teenage prodigy a genius for his psychedelic soul masterpiece Inspiration Information. Shuggie was hailed as the next Jimi Hendrix, and he was even asked to join the Rolling Stones to replace the departing Mick Taylor. But his career flopped, and Shuggie vanished, until Beyoncé, TikTok, and fans on YouTube brought him back. Now the Trout deep dives into the Shuggie Otis story. Right after a message from our supporter.
If you were right and don't see me, I'm going to be with my baby. I am free.
Meet a financial advisor who learns what truly matters to you, creating financial strategies that support a life you love. That's David Smith with Edward Jones. His years of experience has assisted dozens of clients, just like you, to weave their way through the maze of financial opportunities available. One quick call at 469-372-1587 and David can assist your financial wants and needs. That's David Smith with Edward Jones at 469-372-1587. Remember, it's your financial future, make it a rewarding one. David Smith at 469-372-1587.
Hey everybody, it is The Trout once again, and welcome to another episode of the Trout Show podcast, Vinyl to Viral. Today we're going to look into a music legend that was supposed to be a music legend, but his career faded out. And that was a guy by the name of Shuggie Otis. Now that wasn't his real name. His real name was Johnny Alexander Velotes. And I can remember him because the fact when I used to be much younger, I used to go to the record store to try to find music to listen to. And a lot of us did this back then. We just looked at the covers and go, hey, we think we like this guy or not, or this band. And so Shuggie was everywhere. I saw his picture. I remember people talking about him. A lot of famous people talked about him. In fact, I remember seeing his information a lot. A lot of the music magazines talked about him. Shuggie was considered a child prodigy. He was born into a very musical family. In fact, his father, Johnny Otis, was a well-known rhythm and blues guy. Actually, he was a legend. He wrote the song Willie and the Hand Jive, and he was in a band that was very famous back then. Shuggie began playing guitar at the young age of 2 and performing with his father's band by the age of 12. He often would wear sunglasses and a fake mustache to skirt child labor laws. Unbelievable. His early work got him with working with such great artists as Al Kooper and Frank Zappa, but his solo career in the early 70s didn't take off as expected. Shuggie was a wunderkind in the Los Angeles music scene, celebrated by established artists for his prodigious talent as a guitarist, multi-instrumentalist, and songwriter. At just the ages between 15 and 21, he was already rubbing shoulders with music legends, earning praise for his technical skill and innovative sound. Here's some of the people that he worked with at that time. Frank Zappa, who was a maverick in rock and experimental music, featured Otis in his 1969 album Peaches and Regalia, where the 15-year-old Shuggie played bass. Zappa praised Otis's musical intuition, noting his ability to hold his own complex sessions despite his youth. And in interviews from the era, Frank Zappa called him a phenomenon, impressed by his ability to blend bluesy guitar with avant-garde sensibilities. And there wasn't anybody more avant-garde than Frank Zappa at that time. This collaboration gave Otis early credibility among progressive rock and jazz fusions. Now, you may not know who Al Kooper is, But Al Cooper was a founding member of the band Blood, Sweat, and Tears. Probably heard of them. Al Cooper, the multi-instrumentalist behind Bob Dylan's Blonde on Blonde and Blood, Sweat, and Tears, produced Otis's debut album, which was called Here Comes Shuggie Otis, in 1970. He was only 16. Cooper hailed Otis as a genius in the making, touting his guitar chops and songwriting on tracks like Booty Cooler. In a 1970 Rolling Stone interview, Cooper predicted Otis would redefine R&B, drawing comparisons to a young Stevie Wonder for his versatility. And Shuggie's dad, Johnny Otis, rhythm and blues pioneer, was his biggest cheerleader. As a band leader and radio DJ, Johnny featured Shuggie in his review, billing him as a teenage sensation. In a 1971 Billboard article, Johnny called Shuggie the future of soul, emphasizing his ability to play guitar, bass, drums, and organ with equal flair. Well, a lot of people thought it was just a parent talking, it was his bias. Johnny's connections brought Shuggie to the attention of great artists like Etta James. Etta says, well, she praised him at his live performances, basically said he's a great performer. It comes from one of the greatest blues singers ever. And then there's this little-known producer called Quincy Jones that worked with Shuggie on his song Strawberry Letter 23, which is what you heard earlier in this episode, for Otis's 1971 album Freedom Flight. Quincy was so impressed that he produced the Brothers Johnson's 1977 cover of the same tune, which hit number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100. In a 1970s interview, Jones described Otis as a, quote, visionary with a limitless palette, end quote, particularly for the song's psychedelic funk groove and intricate guitar work. This endorsement from a future legend underscored Otis's early promise. Then you get into another great artist, blues icon B.B. King, who shared bills with Johnny's dad, reportedly called Shuggie, quote, a young cat with an old soul. After hearing him play at a 1970 gig, B.B. admired Otis's fluid guitar style, which blended B.B.'s emotive blends with Jimi Hendrix's psychedelic flair, as heard on Freedom Flight's tune Ice Cold Daydream. This nod from a blues giant boosted Otis's reputation among traditionalists. Well, he wasn't just doing that. Otis was also working as a session guitarist. And he worked with artists like Preston Love, Big Joe Turner in the late 60s and early 70s, earned him whispers from the music business as a secret weapon. Musicians in LA studio scene, including drummer Jim Keltner, if you don't know who Jim played with John Lennon in his solo career, praised his ability to nail parts in one take. And Keltner noted in 1972, Downbeat magazine, that Otis' guitar playing sang like nobody else. So here's the question you're asking yourself. Why this praise didn't translate to stardom? Despite this early hype from heavyweights, Otis's career faltered by the mid-1970s, making his rediscovery story all the more poignant for this episode. So what happened to Shuggie? All this hype to a guy that was supposed to be the next Jimi Hendrix? Well, I look at these things as it's not just one thing that happens to a person. It's several things that seem to pile up to make things disappear, not going their own way. He brought an album out in 1974 that was very eclectic. It had a psychedelic soul and funk, and he used drum machines, which of course were just not very good back then, and layered guitars. Now the critics loved it. How many times we've heard that? But the radio stations at the time said, it's too experimental. And they were playing stuff like Sly Stone and Marvin Gaye, which means he got limited airplay. Shuggie was on Epic Records at the time, and it was a big label back then. A lot of famous people were on it. It was known that, record label executives would promote people they liked. Well, they didn't really promote Otis that much. They spent their time focusing on up-and-coming acts like the Jackson 5. And unfortunately, his album only sold about 10,000 copies, and then Epic dropped him. And he tried to shop his stuff at other labels, and they rejected him, and that crushed his momentum. And by his early 20s, Shuggie faced substance abuse and depression, exasperated by industry setbacks. And he became very reclusive. Unlike extroverted peers like George Clinton, and if you know who George Clinton is, he was very extroverted, kept him from capitalizing on early buzz. And the other problem you have, he was so talented and pressure was put on him. And the fact that he was touted as a prodigy at 16 put immense pressure on him. And some musicians, like Al Cooper, later noted he seemed overwhelmed by expectations, retreating from the spotlight. People wanted a lot of big things from him, and I guess personally he couldn't commit to them. It was a lot of stress. So what happened all those years later? When did they rediscover him? Well, Otis put the band together in 2013 and went on a tour. He even went to Coachella, and he showcased his guitar skills, with the Rolling Stone magazine calling him a living link to soul's golden age. In fact, his YouTube clips from those shows have over 500,000 plus views as of 2025. And his Strawberry Letter 23 has now had over 200 million Spotify streams and is a TikTok favorite in lo-fi and chill hop videos, echoing the early buzz from musicians, but now reaching Generation Z. So what do we get out of all this? Well, I don't know what to tell you, except I remember when I saw something about his name showing up on some social media, and I went, oh my goodness, what happened to Shuggie Otis? Well, he faded into obscurity, now in his 70s. It's hard to find anything by him, and you might listen to this song that we played at the beginning, the Strawberry Letter 23, and think, well, gee, it's kind of dated, isn't it? Well, of course, it's been over 50 years ago. But to me, it's a story of what could happen to a lot of people. I knew a guy back in the early 90s when I was producing an album for myself. And I was in the studio one day, and I was talking to my engineer and my other producer, and I said, who's this picture? And above the console, they had a picture of a guy walking, and I can't remember his name. He'd signed a big record label deal, and he had recorded at my friend's studio. And whoever he signed with, one of the major labels, had offered him $100,000, and he said, nah, I think I can get more money from somebody else. Well, after I left the studio and went back many times later, I've looked for that guy's album, and guess what happened to him? He disappeared. And I'm sure there's lots of stories like that. Trust me, I know from being the host of the Trout Show, I've interviewed dozens and dozens of independent artists that are phenomenally good, will probably never make it to the big time. Good, bad, or indifferent, music legends come and go. And in this case, Shuggie Otis, who had a chance to join the Rolling Stones, has never been heard of again. Well, that's it for this episode of The Trout Show. Thank you so much for stopping by and listening to the musical history of Shuggie Otis. Once again, thanks to our sponsor and supporter, David Smith with Edward Jones, that keeps the lights on here at The Trout Show. And for more information about any podcast or YouTube videos, check out my website at thetroutshow.com for more information. So you know what I always say, people? It's only rock and roll, but I love it. See ya.